I'm just gonna say it at the outset of this video. It's wrong to wear revealing clothing. And I think that there's a very simple proof that I'm going to offer in this video that demonstrates that even the people who do and say otherwise, they know this is true. They know that this is the case. But before I make that argument, I think it's pretty easy to admit that this is a controversial topic that it's hard to assess reasonably. Our emotions and our own personal interests get in the way. But assessing it reasonably based on reason is really the only way to do it. Because the problem with any controversial ethical discussion today is that we treat all of these kinds of questions as merely subjective, as in what we mean by right and wrong is merely personal feelings or opinions. But if we treat all ethical questions as merely subjective, as in my opinion and my feelings against yours, then there's no way to find any resolution because neither are more valid than the other. But yet some of these questions we do have to resolve. And if there's nothing neutral to appeal to between contesting parties, then the only way to resolve that kind of conflict is through the assertion of power, which means that someone's going to be oppressed at the expense of the more powerful. And that's a terrible way to live as a society. And it simply didn't used to be like that. In whatever we mean by the olden days, ethical questions were treated as rational questions, as in something our reason could resolve, which is much better because reason is something neutral and accessible to each and every one of us, like a parent to children who can't resolve a fight and need a neutral party to help them solve the problems. So while this is a controversial topic, can I invite you to lay aside your weapons of assault and come and be reasonable with me for 15 minutes or so. I'm going to make arguments that I think are intelligible and rational, and I'd invite you to do the same if you disagree. And the reason I think that this matters, the reason I think this affects everyone, is because it's so pervasive and increasingly so as time goes on. The other day I was at a department store, just checking out with my goods, and there were 3 women standing individually in front of me. They weren't part of a group, they were just successively in line in front of me. And every single one of them was wearing leggings, the kind that left basically nothing to the imagination, and not long sweaters to compensate or anything like that. It was just buttocks in all their splendor for the consumption of anyone and everyone. And that isn't an isolated anecdote in my experience. Just this morning, I went on my morning run and crossed paths with several people out and about on the trails. And because I knew I was going to be talking about this, I decided to make a mental note of what various people were wearing. Every male that I passed was wearing something loose and comfortable, similar to what I was wearing. Every female was wearing very revealing leggings. Now you might say, well, they were exercising. You can't blame them, and that's true, they were. But so was I. And based on the looks of most of them, I was working a little bit harder than they were. But I wasn't wearing leggings and a cropped shirt. I was wearing loose shorts that go down somewhere around my knees and a comfortable t-shirt. So here's the crux of the matter for me. Here's how we know that they also know that this is an excessively revealing way to dress. Because if we go back to that department store line of anecdote that I shared, if I decided to stare at the said buttocks in a way that was obvious to them, I'm willing to bet the women standing in front of me would protest. Now, take it even a step further. Imagine if I made a comment while staring, like, "That's some prime posterior real estate you have there." And then I asked her, "Where do you work out?" I can guarantee that most women in that situation would not respond well. Most women would treat that as a form of harassment from a stranger. And frankly, they'd be right. But now imagine if instead I was looking at a woman's hair and I complimented her on that and maybe asked her where she got her hair cut. I can see some maybe being a little apprehensive to engage in conversation, especially if they thought I was like hitting on them. But in general, I can't see them getting excessively offended by that. So what's the difference? Why is there a massive distinction between looking at and even complimenting a woman's hair, or her nails, or maybe her sandals, and it not being offensive? But if you stare at and compliment her posterior when it's on full display, she's likely to take offense. And even if you think both are inappropriate, fine, but I think we can all admit that one is way worse than another. And the answer to that question, if it wasn't obvious to you, is because the anatomical parts that leggings and booty shorts reveal are private and shouldn't be commented on by strangers, because strangers by definition are not compatible with privacy. That's the only possible reason a woman could take offense if someone stared at or commented on her hindquarters. And if we can agree on this, that private things are not for strangers, then that raises a massive question. If it's private, why is it on full display in public where all the strangers are? If it's not for public consumption, then why is it being made so excessively available to strangers in public? It would be like me saying, this is my watch. I really like my watch. I care about it. It's for me and my use only. Nobody else is allowed to use it or take it. It's just for me alone. But then I go and leave it somewhere lying around in public. How could I possibly fault someone if they just walked away with it as if it was theirs? It's my fault for leaving it exposed in public. I didn't want strangers or people I don't trust to claim it for their own, therefore I shouldn't expose it for their taking in public. If you think it's wrong for strangers to stare at your posterior, and from what I can tell, that is the case with most women, then there's an amazingly simple solution. Don't make it available for their visual consumption. Because there's a principle here that we should all have some familiarity with to some degree. Like, at least intuitively, which is that intimacy is the exclusive occasion in which privacy can be shared. Just think about this for a second. You have some relationships that are more intimate than others, and that makes them special in an exclusive way. For example, my wife knows things about me that nobody else knows, and I've reserved those things for her knowledge because she, more than anyone else, has earned that exclusivity. It also makes that relationship special. If I shared intimate details, including my body, with anyone and everyone, then how could I say that I have a more intimate relationship with my wife than anyone else? I couldn't, obviously. Reserving certain knowledge and certain actions for exclusive intimate relationships is what makes them intimate and special. The same is true of our bodies. If we give away the private knowledge of our bodies to everyone and anyone, then it isn't very special when we try to give it away to someone intimately. The same can be said for something that is valuable because it's rare. If everyone had a giant gold nugget, then gold wouldn't be valuable. It's valuable because it's rare, and the intimacy that you have to give is only valuable because it's rarely exposed. Intimacy depends on exclusivity, but if you violate exclusivity by giving intimacy away in public, then you've made it impossible for you to have true intimacy to give away. So it logically, rationally, and intellectually follows that we should keep intimate things private by concealing them, just as we do for everything else in our lives that are private. And frankly, recognizing this fact myself, that private things are for privacy, I don't want to look at the private parts of strangers either. When I'm standing in line in a narrow checkout aisle in which I have to look forward to know when to move up and when my turn is coming, there aren't a lot of places to look. So when all three people standing in front of me are relying on a thin, form-fitting, stretchy fabric to provide for their privacy, my own freedom to not have to stare at the ground is being confiscated from me. And freedom is always the reply. It's always the rejoinder to any sort of complaint that I might make about this. People will appeal to the freedom to express themselves however they want and insist that we shouldn't police what women wear. But what about the freedom to be able to go out in public and open your eyes without fear of being accused of violating someone else's privacy? It's like, you're in public. You're not in a private setting. You need to be responsible for your own privacy. All the burdens of protecting your privacy shouldn't be laid at the feet of strangers who are just trying to get on with their day. When I went shopping that day, I didn't ask for the responsibility of protecting the privacy of all the women standing in front of me. That should have been their responsibility when they got dressed that morning. But instead, it somehow becomes my responsibility to not look at them and to stare at the ground, which seems like a much bigger infringement upon someone's freedom and liberty. Here's another example of what I'm talking about. My kids play soccer. As a parent watching, I necessarily have to sit behind the area in which the coaches and the kids are occupying so that I don't get in the way of them. So at one of my kids' games, there were 2 female coaches on one side and 2 male coaches on the other. The 2 female coaches were wearing basically booty shorts. One of them was basically underwear. I don't know how else to describe it. It was a full revelation of anything you'd want to know about her anatomy. The 2 male coaches on the other side were wearing loose-fitting shorts and t-shirts, but my kids were playing on the side with the booty shorts. And where we as parents normally sit meant that coaches would walk right in front of your eyeline periodically. So if I didn't want someone's privacy imposed on me, I had to move to an awkward spot where it was harder to see what was going on and to cheer my kids on. Again, we talk about freedoms like freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and freedom of mobility as intrinsic rights. But what about the freedom to be able to open your eyes and not have someone else's attempt at forcing their own privacy upon your field of vision? Because that's what it is, and that's what makes this behavior so incoherent. You want to have your privacy protected while also creating an exposition of it in public, and then insist that it's everyone else's responsibility to go out of their way to protect it when you could have taken simple measures of doing so yourself by not making an exhibition of your body. It's to insist that the whole world be arranged in such a way that suits you at the expense of everyone else. To be able to do what you want, but also have everyone around you respond in the exact way you want them to. The problem with that is that our choices and our actions have consequences, and they tend to create reactions in other people, whether we like those reactions or not. And I don't want any kind of intimate awareness of other people who I have no intention of being intimate with. I have my wife, my family, and my circle of friends that I enjoy, varying degrees of intimacy with. But when I'm out in public, I'd rather not have someone else's sexuality imposed on me such that I have to avert my eyes everywhere I look. Now, I know some people will complain and say, why are you only talking about women's clothing? And the answer is because this is usually not a problem for men. Again, the male soccer coaches were not wearing booty shorts. All the men I encountered on my run, including myself this morning, were wearing reasonably modest and comfortable clothing. Outside of a theatrical setting, I don't think I've ever seen a man wearing leggings in public, so that his private parts were on full display. But I could go for a walk or a drive right now, and I guarantee that I would see some female body parts if I wanted to. This is a problem that is particular to women. Men have their own vices, don't get me wrong. Vices that are particular to them, but this is one for women to take some more responsibility on. And the alternative is so much better. My wife and daughters take a lot of pride in wearing nice traditional dresses, and they get compliments all the time from men and from women. It's amazing how much of an occasion for building a sense of camaraderie and community with people that those occasions create. Charming old men will say the nicest things to my wife and daughters, things that I would never be offended by, and neither would they. Other women will approach them and ask them where they got their dresses. I guarantee nobody's going to say nice things like that about booty shorts, and if they did, it's probably because they're a creep. The fact is, modest clothing attracts the kind of people that you should want to be friends with, people of goodwill, and the kind of people that you can trust. Revealing clothing attracts people who simply want to consume your body and care very little for your soul. Okay, thanks for watching. These videos and this channel are only possible because of viewer support, so if you can spare some help, please consider making a contribution through my website at brianholdsworth.ca or join my locals community at brianholdsworth.locals.com, where you can interact with myself and other like-minded individuals. We actually just started a monthly Zoom meetup where we're studying some articles of St. Thomas Aquinas in his Summa. So if that's interesting to you, then come join us there. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe.